Georgia, Germany, Lithuania, Poland, Spain, Sweden, and Ukraine to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. And in accordance with Rule 39 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I now invite Ms. Rosemary DiCarlo, Under-Secretary General for Political and Peace-Building Affairs, to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. In accordance with Rule 39 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I also invite His Excellency Mr. Stavros Lambrinidis, Head of the Delegation of the European Union to the United Nations, to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. The Security Council will now begin its consideration of item 2 of the agenda, and I now give the floor to Ms. Rosemary DiCarlo.
Thank you, Mr. President. Secretary General Guterres, unfortunately, was unable to be in New York today, but I will deliver his statement. Thank you. 4 years after the Russian Federation launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine, the war remains a stain on our collective conscience. Day after day, year after year, we have witnessed the cascading consequences of this blatant violation of international law, including the UN Charter. Shattered lives, devastated communities, and deepened regional and global instability. The human toll is catastrophic. Despite unprecedented diplomatic efforts, last year was the deadliest for Ukrainian civilians since 2022. More than 15,000 civilians have been killed in Ukraine since the start of the invasion, and more than 41,000 injured. Millions have been forced to flee from their homes. Millions more require life-saving assistance. Human rights violations are rampant. The plight of Ukrainian children is particularly dire. More than 3,200 children have been killed or injured. More than 1/3 of Ukrainian children remain displaced, and an estimated 2.2 million require humanitarian assistance. A whole generation has lost years of education as schools have come under fire. Mr. President, this winter, the Russian Federation intensified strikes against Ukraine's civilian energy infrastructure. Large-scale attacks have killed and injured scores of civilians and deprived millions of electricity, heating, and water for prolonged periods, including in the capital, Kyiv. In sub-zero temperatures, strikes on electricity, heating, and water systems turn access to basic services into a matter of life and death. Civilians in the Russian Federation are also increasingly affected by reported Ukrainian strikes. International humanitarian law is unequivocal. Attacks on civilians and civilian infrastructure are strictly prohibited. I condemn all such attacks, no matter where they occur. I urge both sides to implement an immediate moratorium on all such attacks. Mr. President, the ongoing fighting also poses direct risks to the safe and secure operations of Ukraine's nuclear sites. This unconscionable game of nuclear roulette must cease immediately. I commend the International Atomic Energy Agency and its teams for their critical efforts on the ground, despite the serious dangers involved. Mr. President, even as the fighting rages, the UN is working closely with the government of Ukraine to repair damaged infrastructure, keep people warm, and sustain critical services. Despite limited access and the deteriorating security situation, we are also working with local partners to deliver food, water, medical supplies, and other humanitarian aid, including to those in frontline communities. And I urge member states to fully fund the humanitarian response. Mr. President, throughout the war, the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights has reported widespread human rights violations. torture, sexual violence, and even executions of prisoners of war and civilian detainees. These acts have gone with virtually no accountability. I welcome ongoing prisoner exchanges and urge that all prisoners of war and detainees be treated humanely and released in accordance with international humanitarian law and international human rights law. Any Ukrainian children deported or forcibly transferred to the Russian Federation and occupied areas of Ukraine must be returned home to their families without delay. I commend efforts to facilitate such returns and family reunifications. We will continue to work closely with all relevant actors to ensure that this happens in a safe, swift, and verifiable manner. I urge the sides to continue to work constructively to address these concerns as a matter of priority. Mr. President, a year ago, this Council adopted Resolution 2774, imploring a swift end to the conflict and urging a lasting peace between Ukraine and the Russian Federation. I commend the ongoing diplomatic efforts by the United States and others to end the war. We need concrete measures to de-escalate the fighting without delay and to create the space for diplomacy. The longer this war continues, the greater the suffering and the greater the risks for regional and international peace and security. As complex as the path may be, our collective obligation is clear. Use every diplomatic tool to end the war. United Nations expertise is readily available to support the ongoing peace efforts. Our tools are at the disposal of the parties and mediators. The parameters of peace in Ukraine are not a mystery. It must be in accordance with international law, including the UN Charter and relevant UN resolutions. And it must uphold the sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity of Ukraine within its internationally recognized borders. Enough with the death, enough with the destruction, enough with the broken lives and shattered futures. It is time for an immediate, full, and unconditional ceasefire, the first step toward a just peace that saves lives and ends the endless suffering. Thank you.
Well, I thank Mr. Cullo for her briefing, and I shall now make a statement in my capacity as the Minister of State for Europe, North America and Overseas Territories of the United Kingdom. As we mark this grim anniversary, I want to reflect on three personal encounters I've had with Ukrainians from all walks of life. They show what Russia's illegal and unprovoked war is doing to civilians, to vital infrastructure, and fundamentally to the rules that we are all here to uphold, our very United Nations Charter. First, a year ago I visited Bucha, and there I met a priest who told me of shocking atrocities carried out by the Russians. He recalled how he dug graves for members of his own congregation after the massacre and swapped his robes for civilian clothes after a fellow priest was killed. And that conversation stays with me because it shows how Russia wages this war. And today, notwithstanding the false claims by the Russian representative in the General Assembly, its forces continue to strike Ukrainian civilians and communities with missiles and drones, killing and destroying. And I should add, of course, that the same disregard for civilian lives is not just evident in Ukraine, it's also evident in the killing of Alexei Navalny, which we are confident was the result of lethal poisoning. Second, last September, I met children who had been forcibly taken from occupied Ukrainian territory by Russian forces. They told me how they were separated from their families with new identities imposed upon them. I have a picture in my office painted by a Ukrainian child who had escaped Russia, now undergoing therapy to deal with the ordeal that they had endured. And Russia is doing this to tens of thousands of children, using them as tools of war. And I have to ask the Russian representative, is there no shame? This must end. And third, last month, I spoke to school children in Kiev via video link from a school in East London. And they told me how happy they were that day to be in their classroom learning like all children should be able to, because regular power cuts kept disrupting their lessons and attacks near their schools and their homes. And children all over Ukraine are enduring days and nights marked by air raid sirens and blackouts, by fear and loss. And Save the Children reports that Ukrainian children have endured 4,000 hours of air raid alarms since the start of the full-scale invasion. That's equivalent to more than 5 months of constant alert. And this is taking a severe toll on their mental health. A generation is being robbed of the security and peace that every child in this world deserves. And there is no respite even during the brutal cold of winter. Let us speak the truth in this place. Russia is relentlessly targeting civilian infrastructure, and since October, it has launched 20 mass attacks on Ukraine's energy system, firing more than 1,000 missiles. It has struck again and again, leaving hospitals without power, schools unable to function, families facing winter in darkness and cold. But what has stayed with me after meeting Ukrainians from all walks of life is their incredible courage in the face of this barbarity. It has earned them the respect of people the world over, and the United Kingdom stands by their side, and our people stand by their side every day. Our support is practical and it's sustained. We are strengthening air defences. We are helping Ukraine keep essential services running when power is cut. We are supporting Ukraine to enable the return of stolen children. And we are pursuing justice and accountability through international mechanisms. And today, we have announced a £30 million package for emergency energy support, humanitarian assistance, and justice and accountability in Ukraine. This builds on billions of pounds of UK support, guarantees, and direct military aid to Ukraine since 2022, and we will continue to stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes to achieve a just and lasting peace and beyond. This also means keeping up the pressure on Russia and choking off their war machine. And that is why today we have been announcing our largest package of measures since 2022, targeting oil revenues and components fueling that war machine. And we are working with partners across this council and beyond to defend the UN Charter, because Russia's war is illegal and unprovoked. It is an assault on the Charter's foundational principles, respect for sovereignty and for territorial integrity. We call again on Russia to comply with international law. And we are pressing it to engage meaningfully in the US-led peace process. Along with France, we are also leading the Coalition of the Willing to support Ukraine now and to ensure that peace endures. Ukraine has made clear its readiness for peace, but Russia has not. Instead, it continues to escalate attacks on civilians while stalling negotiations. So let us be clear again in this place what peace requires: a full, immediate and unconditional ceasefire, a settlement that results in a sovereign, secure and independent Ukraine, all the stolen children and prisoners of war returned, and justice for the crimes that have been committed. That is what every Ukrainian deserves, and it is our responsibility as members of this council to demand it. I now resume my function as President of the Council. I now give the floor to Her Excellency Ms. Baiba Braja, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Latvia.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Under-Secretary General Di Carlo, for her briefing. On behalf of the Secretary General, and let me pay respect to the UN staff working on the ground in Ukraine and doing their job in very difficult circumstances. Excellencies, 1,461 days of entirely illegal, unjustified, and unprovoked war. A war with root causes known by the entire world. It's Russia's imperial and colonial aspirations. UN Charter principles shattered, countless Ukrainian lives lost and destroyed, war crimes, global consequences for food security, ecocide, landmines, global arms race, all because of one state, which refuses to accept that empires are dead. One state that 4 years ago blocked the Council from taking action. One state that a year ago vetoed the reference to the UN Charter in the Security Council resolution. Today, the same one state continues to sabotage the peace efforts led by the United States and Ukraine. This state is Russia, a permanent member of this council, with a legal responsibility in the UN Charter to uphold international peace and security. The good news is that Russia's aggression is failing. In 4 years, it has achieved none of its strategic goals. Last year alone, Russia lost more than 400,000 troops killed and severely wounded, and it was able to capture less than 1% of Ukrainian territory. At the same time, as confirmed by UN reports and the briefing by Under-Secretary General today, Russia's missile and drone attacks on Ukrainian civilians last year were the deadliest since the start of the war. During the coldest winter of the decade, Russia constantly destroys civilian and energy infrastructure. Millions are suffering in freezing temperatures. Children and elderly are freezing to death in their beds. Russia has forcibly transferred around 20,000 Ukrainian children and militarized Ukrainian children in the occupied territories. In so-called summer camps, they are forced to operate drones, dig trenches, mine and demine areas, and use grenades and firearms. Russia has also bombed first responders, humanitarian workers, and clearly marked UN aid envoys and embassies in Kiev. Mr. President, Russia's war has severe global consequences. Countries in Africa, Asia, and the Middle East are not safe from Russia's colonial imperial ambitions. Russia has manipulated and coerced thousands to the front lines to kill Ukrainians. We have seen the videos of Russian commanders using foreigners as cannon fodder. I urge all countries to protect their citizens from this fate. From dying for what? For Russia's desperate attempts to restore its empire. Mr. President, Ukrainians continue to inspire us with their bravery and resilience. Ukraine is a strong democracy and a proud nation. Ukraine will stay free and sovereign. But it's time to bring this war to an end, to have an immediate, full, and unconditional ceasefire. Latvia fully supports the peace efforts led by the US in Ukraine. We stand for a just and lasting peace, a peace that guarantees Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity, a peace where Russia is unable to resume its aggression. But there is only one country and one man standing between us here and peace. This country is Russia, and this man is Vladimir Putin. This is why Latvia urges all countries to exert maximum pressure on Russia, restrict Russia's economy, impose sanctions, isolate it in international organizations, to stop the killing and ensure accountability for war crimes. I thank you. Slava Ukraini.
I thank Her Excellency Barbara Braje for the statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Denmark.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I also thank the Under-Secretary General for her sobering briefing and welcome the Deputy Foreign Minister of Ukraine to this meeting. And thank you, Minister, for leading the meeting here today. Mr. President, exactly 4 years ago, as this Council met in emergency session, and as the Secretary General appealed directly to President Putin to make peace prevail, Russia launched its unprovoked and illegal full-scale invasion of Ukraine. For 4 years, this Council has met numerous times to shine a light on the devastation and destruction caused by this aggression, on the humanitarian crisis unleashed, on the children abducted, on the threat of nuclear disaster, and on its global repercussions. Since that day 4 years ago, and despite unspeakable suffering of the Ukrainian people, the fundamental situation has remained largely unchanged. Russia's clear violation of international law and the UN Charter continues. Its aspirations to subjugate Ukraine and unlawfully seized territory by force continue. Ukraine's bravery has remained undeterred as it legitimately exercises its inherent right to self-defense. Mr. President, what has changed over the past 4 years is the scale of death, destruction, and terror inflicted on Ukraine's civilians. In this Russian war of territorial conquest, millions have been forced to flee their homes. Hundreds and thousands of soldiers have perished, and at least 55,000 Ukrainian civilians have been killed or injured. For 5 winters in a row, Russian drones and missiles have rained down on Ukraine's energy grid, desperately trying, but failing, to break the Ukrainian people's spirit. We recall that intentionally directing attacks against civilian objects is a serious violation of international humanitarian law and constitutes a war crime. As we've heard from the Undersecretary General, 2025 was in fact the deadliest year for Ukraine's civilian population in this war. Russia's attacks on residential buildings, schools, hospitals, churches, and playgrounds only intensified in this past year. We cannot allow this to continue. Mr. President, exactly 1 year ago, this Council adopted Resolution 2774. This resolution, which Russia supported, implored a swift end to the conflict and urged lasting peace. Quickly thereafter, Ukraine offered an immediate and unconditional ceasefire. It has stood by that offer ever since. President Putin, on the other hand, has repeatedly rejected it, choosing violence and aggression again and again. Russia shows no interest in peace. Rather, its actions are desperate and deeply cynical. Denmark urgently calls on Russia to adhere to all its obligations under international law and to engage in good faith in negotiations to end this war. Mr. President, this morning, the General Assembly reaffirmed its call for a ceasefire and lasting peace in Ukraine with an overwhelming majority. Around this table, and indeed around the globe, there is a clear demand for peace, for a just, sustainable, and lasting end to this terrible war. Demands to uphold Ukraine's sovereignty, territorial integrity, and political independence, as well as accountability for Russia's crimes. Anything less, or without robust security guarantees for Ukraine, would consign future generations to live in constant fear of further invasion. The time for Russia to hear and heed these demands is now. Mr. President, in closing, the United Nations was not founded to bear witness to aggression. It was founded to stop it. The Security Council carries not only authority, but responsibility. Responsibility to maintain international peace and security, to defend the Charter, and to act. Denmark stands with Ukraine, both in word and in deeds. Our support is unwavering. Ukraine and its people deserve to be free, to choose their own destiny, to live in peace and prosperity. On this sad 4-year anniversary, let us not only reflect on this imperative, but act on it. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Denmark for her statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Greece.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to commend the United Kingdom for convening this meeting as we mark 4 years since the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I also thank USG DiCarlo for her sobering remarks on behalf of the Secretary General, and I welcome the participation of the Deputy Foreign Minister of Ukraine in today's meeting. Mr. President, allow me to begin by reiterating Greece's unwavering solidarity and support to the Ukrainian people as we are sadly standing witness to an ever-worsening humanitarian situation. Ukrainians endure large-scale Russian airstrikes targeting major cities and critical energy infrastructure across the country, weaponizing the energy needs of innocent civilians amidst harsh winter conditions. The targeting of civilians and civilian energy infrastructure is a blatant violation of international humanitarian law and must be condemned. The children of Ukraine, the most vulnerable part of any population, have gravely suffered in the course of these 4 years. More than 3,000 of them have been killed or injured, and thousands more were otherwise gravely affected, uprooted, and transferred out of the country. Greece calls for their immediate, safe, and unconditional return. Despite the recent commendable diplomatic efforts, peace remains elusive. Greece has consistently called for a ceasefire and has vigorously supported the objective of a just, lasting, and comprehensive peace in Ukraine, a peace that will be in line with international law and the UN Charter, and in particular with the principles of respect of sovereignty and territorial integrity of all states. We firmly reject revisionist policies and any attempt to change borders through the use of force. Mr. President, the rules and principles enshrined in the UN Charter are the very foundations of the international legal order we subscribed to 80 years ago. It is in the vital interest of this Council and of all the members of the United Nations to keep this order intact and uphold the principles of sovereignty, territorial integrity, and the peaceful settlement of disputes. As a founding member of the United Nations, Greece has shaped its foreign policy all along on the basis of respect for international law and the principles of the UN Charter. In this spirit, we remain fully committed to Ukraine's sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity. In closing, Mr. President, Greece, along with all partners devoted to the same principles, will continue to support efforts aimed at restoring peace in Ukraine, a fair, lasting, and comprehensive peace, a peace that will guarantee a prosperous, independent, and sovereign future for Ukraine, free from the threat of renewed aggression. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Greece for his statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of France.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Monsieur le Président, je remercie tout d'abord Madame la secrétaire générale adjointe, Rosemary Di Carlo, pour son intervention. 4 ans, jour pour jour, après le début de l'invasion de l'Ukraine par la Russie, 1 an après l'adoption par ce Conseil d'une résolution votée par la Russie elle-même, qui demandait une fin rapide à ce conflit, ce triste anniversaire rappelle de notre part que nous agissions pour mettre en œuvre le mandat du Conseil de sécurité au service de la paix et de la sécurité internationale. Je veux donc saluer ici la clarté du secrétaire général des Nations Unies qui, comme l'a rappelé la secrétaire générale adjointe, a redit hier les exigences fondamentales qu'impose cet objectif. Un cessez-le-feu immédiat, complet et sans condition comme première étape vers une paix juste et durable, conforme à la Charte des Nations Unies. Ce matin, l'Assemblée générale a amplement adopté une résolution présentée par l'Ukraine qui demande exactement cela. La poursuite par la Russie de son agression est injustifiable parce qu'elle constitue toujours une violation majeure de la Charte des Nations Unies, qui plus est par un membre permanent de ce Conseil. Parce que les moyens employés sont absolument inacceptables. Faute de parvenir à avancer face aux lignes de défense de l'armée ukrainienne, la Russie se déchaîne sur l'arrière, infligeant à la population civile ukrainienne un hiver sans chauffage et sans électricité, sous les bombes, par des températures glaciales. Malgré les crimes de guerre, la Russie piétine, s'acharne et démontre qu'elle ne veut pas la paix. Monsieur le Président, depuis 4 ans, l'Ukraine résiste. Depuis 4 ans, elle se bat pour son indépendance, son intégrité territoriale, sa souveraineté, sa liberté. Les forces russes se heurtent à un mur qu'elles ne parviennent pas à franchir et qu'elles ne parviendront pas à franchir. Il est temps que cette guerre s'arrête. La négociation pour y parvenir doit se faire avec lucidité. La France avait tout fait pour éviter cette guerre. Elle fera tout pour contribuer à ce que cette guerre s'arrête. Nous appuyons les efforts de paix en cours, en lien étroit avec nos partenaires américains et ukrainiens. Nous souhaitons y donner davantage d'ampleur à ces efforts, notamment en y faisant entendre plus fort la voix de l'Europe, concernée au plus haut point. Nous sommes prêts à appuyer un accord de paix. Cela implique de préparer les conditions d'une paix durable. Le président de la République et le Premier ministre britannique ont réuni ce jour plus de 30 pays de la coalition des volontaires qui, demain, garantiront à l'Ukraine de ne plus devoir revivre une invasion russe, ces dirigeants ont réitéré leur engagement indéfectible à œuvrer ensemble pour parvenir à une paix juste et durable, conformément aux principes de la Charte des Nations Unies, et ils ont réaffirmé que les frontières internationales ne doivent pas être modifiées par la force. Monsieur le Président, pour que les réunions diplomatiques aboutissent, la paix appelle une volonté politique sincère. Nous l'avons. La grande majorité de la communauté internationale l'a. L'Ukraine l'a. Seule la Russie continue de vouloir la guerre. Ces manœuvres diplomatiques dilatoires ne trompent personne. Nous devons continuer d'agir pour la contraindre à la paix. Je vous remercie.
Well, merci beaucoup, and I thank the representative of France for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Panama.
Gracias, señor presidente. Saludamos a las altas autoridades y distinguidos representantes de los países que nos distinguen con su participación. Las declaraciones de la secretaria general adjunta, Rosemary DiCarlo, una vez más ponen de relieve las devastadoras consecuencias del conflicto y reafirman la necesidad de ponerle fin. Panamá también ha reiterado de manera constante este mismo mensaje y una vez más reafirma hoy su urgente llamado a un cese al fuego. A 4 años del conflicto en Ucrania, nos reunimos nuevamente para intentar atender los profundos efectos de hechos que representan un quiebre sustancial del orden internacional, al recurrirse, una vez más, al uso de la fuerza por encima de los principios consagrados en la Carta de las Naciones Unidas. Este conflicto trascendió con rapidez su geografía inmediata. No solo impacta de manera directa a Europa, reconfigurando alianzas y acelerando procesos de rearme, sus secuelas se proyectan también a escala global. Inestabilidad energética, inseguridad alimentaria y disrupción de la seguridad marítima. Asimismo, el conflicto volvió a situar en el centro del debate internacional dinámicas de una etapa de marcada bipolaridad que parecían haber sido superadas a finales del siglo pasado. La transgresión de los principios de soberanía, integridad territorial y de la provisión del uso de la fuerza dejó de ser una discusión del pasado, alterando los marcos normativos actuales. Sobre el terreno, los misiles y drones no han cesado y la creciente sofisticación tecnológica de la guerra, junto con la proliferación de armamento, han alimentado el conflicto y elevado las pérdidas humanas. La fortaleza mostrada por los civiles, principales víctimas de esta guerra, no debe normalizarse. Su sufrimiento, consecuencia de la geopolítica, ya ha sido suficiente. Además, las cifras de militares fallecidos, que podrían acercarse a los 2 millones, reflejan también la magnitud y gravedad del conflicto. El esfuerzo humanitario de las agencias de las Naciones Unidas y de otras organizaciones no puede sostenerse indefinidamente. Es preciso reiterar que el respeto al derecho internacional humanitario exige garantizar condiciones humanas para los prisioneros de guerra, asegurar la atención a enfermos y heridos graves y su repatriación cuando sea posible. Además, la búsqueda de los desaparecidos debe permanecer como una prioridad humanitaria central para todas las partes. En ese sentido, resulta indispensable garantizar al Comité Internacional de la Cruz Roja acceso regular y sin restricciones a todos los detenidos en ambos lados del frente, de conformidad con la Tercera Convención de Ginebra. De igual manera, asegurar a la Oficina de Coordinación de Asuntos Humanitarios acceso libre y seguro a ambos lados del frente, especialmente a las regiones de Donetsk y Luhansk. Además, la guerra en Ucrania sigue teniendo un impacto devastador sobre la niñez. Miles de menores han muerto o resultado heridos y millones permanecen desplazados o con acceso limitado a servicios esenciales. Persisten denuncias preocupantes sobre traslados forzados y separaciones familiares que obstaculizan la reunificación, las cuales deben ser debidamente esclarecidas. La protección de la infancia no admite ambigüedades. Es una obligación jurídica, humanitaria y moral. Presidente, resulta inviable sostener mesas de diálogo mientras continúan las agresiones y se siga alimentando el conflicto con armas y otros recursos, lo que no solo agrava el sufrimiento humano, sino que debilita aún más el sistema internacional. Por ello, reconocemos los esfuerzos diplomáticos de distintos actores internacionales y el impulso de los Estados Unidos para una paz sostenible en Ucrania, visibilizados en las recientes reuniones en Abu Dhabi y Ginebra, que esperamos continúen desarrollándose para ya poner punto final a un conflicto que no debe continuar. Panamá, presidente, reafirma su compromiso con los principios del multilateralismo y la paz, rechazando que la desconfianza, la preponderancia de la fuerza se conviertan en norma. Por ello, respaldamos la resolución 2774 del 2025 de este Consejo y todos los esfuerzos diplomáticos orientados a poner fin al conflicto en plena consonancia con la Carta de las Naciones Unidas. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, and I thank the representative of Panama for his statement. I now give the floor to the representative of the United States.
Thank you, Mr. President. And thank you, Undersecretary General Rosemary DiCarlo, for your briefing. 4 long, brutal years have passed since the Russia-Ukraine war escalated to its current horrific scale, resulting in thousands of casualties, men, women, children, soldiers, and civilians. This war must end immediately. Colleagues, today we also mark the 1-year anniversary of the adoption by this Council of Resolution 2774, which implored a swift end to the Russia-Ukraine conflict and a lasting peace between Ukraine and the Russian Federation. That call has obviously not yet been heeded. Under President Trump's leadership, the United States continues to push for a negotiated and durable end to the war. Military force will never resolve this conflict. Only a diplomatic solution, agreed to by both sides, can do so. We are closer to a deal right now than at any point since the war began, but we have obviously not reached it yet. The fighting continues. Bombs are still falling in Ukraine, hitting energy infrastructure and leaving thousands of homes without light or heat in the depths of winter. But make no mistake, President Trump is committed to peace prevailing. His actions, public statements, and global leadership mission makes clear his determination to put an end to the carnage. Under President, I should say, one reason why the conflict continues to grind on, in spite of the staggering costs it has already meant for Russia, is the support that Russia continues to receive from third countries. China remains the decisive enabler of Russia's war industrial machine. We have urged China many times in this chamber to stop supplying Russia with dual-use goods and material components that end up in the drones and other weapons used in Ukraine. China also remains one of the top importers of Russian oil. If China truly wants peace, it should immediately end exports of dual-use goods and stop purchasing Russian oil. The DPRK has transferred munitions and ballistic missiles to Russia for use in Ukraine, and since October 2024 has deployed thousands of DPRK troops to fight for Russia on the front lines. These activities not only prolong the war, They violate the UN Security Council resolutions that Russia itself voted for. Resolutions 1718, 1874, and 2270 collectively prohibit UN member states from receiving arms and related materiel, training, or assistance from or providing them to the DPRK. Iran has supplied Russia with hundreds of UAVs and UAV technology for use in Ukraine, including transfers before October 2023 in violation of Security Council Resolution 2231. More recently, Cuba has emerged as another significant contributor of foreign troops to Russia. In 2025, Cuba has also signed new defense agreements with Russia and Belarus. The United States calls on all UN member states to end any and all support that enables the continuation of this deplorable war, which extracts a devastating human toll and threatens peace and security around the world. We call on all countries to join us in our efforts to encourage a negotiated, durable peace that will restore prosperity, security, and a bright future for everyone around the globe. Most urgently, we once again call on both parties to stay at the negotiating table and, in a spirit of flexibility, compromise and a duty to protect and preserve the lives of their own citizens, to end this barbaric war once and for all. Mr. President, I thank you.
I thank the representative of the United States for her statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Colombia.
Gracias, señor presidente. Transmito mi agradecimiento a la subsecretaria general para Asuntos Políticos y de Consolidación de Paz por su completo y sensible reporte. Saludo asimismo a las delegaciones que nos acompañan en la sesión de hoy. Señor presidente, me dirijo hoy ante este Consejo con inmensa tristeza por las consecuencias devastadoras de la guerra en Ucrania. Tras 4 años de enfrentamientos, el sufrimiento humano continúa acumulándose de manera alarmante, dejando una huella de destrucción que trasciende el campo de batalla y se instala en la vida cotidiana de millones de personas. Colombia lamenta profundamente la pérdida de vidas humanas. Cada cifra representa una historia truncada, una familia afectada y una comunidad en duelo. Hoy, cuando se marcan 4 años de violencia sostenida, recordamos y rendimos homenaje especialmente a las víctimas civiles, niños que han visto interrumpida su infancia, mujeres que cargan con el peso del desplazamiento y la incertidumbre, personas mayores que han perdido su hogar y su red de apoyo, personas con discapacidad cuya vulnerabilidad se ha agravado, y el personal humanitario que arriesga su vida para asistir a otros. A todas las víctimas y a sus familiares les expresamos nuestra solidaridad, nuestra empatía y nuestro respeto. El impacto no es solo material. Los reportes sobre el daño a la infraestructura civil, hospitales, escuelas, redes eléctricas, sistemas de agua y saneamiento confirman que se han afectado servicios críticos para la supervivencia. En este sentido, es menester recordar que el respeto al derecho internacional humanitario no es opcional ni selectivo, es una obligación fundamental que recae sobre todos los Estados miembros de las Naciones Unidas, incluidos los miembros de este Consejo. Señor presidente, sobre la base de los principios de la Carta y del derecho internacional, se ha construido el diálogo y el entendimiento entre nuestros países. No es el momento de abandonar esos fundamentos, por el contrario, es en los peores momentos de guerra cuando debemos aferrarnos a lo primordial, la protección de la vida, la dignidad humana y la población civil. El respeto a los principios de distinción, proporcionalidad y precaución en las hostilidades es una aspiración abstracta, sino una exigencia concreta y urgente. Por ello, Colombia reitera el llamado a garantizar un acceso humanitario seguro rápido y sin obstáculos a todas las personas necesitadas, las agencias humanitarias y las organizaciones que trabajan sobre el terreno deben poder desempeñar su labor con continuidad y previsibilidad. Es indispensable preservar la acción humanitaria basada en los principios de humanidad, neutralidad, imparcialidad e independencia. Estos principios no deben instrumentalizarse ni condicionarse. Son la base que permite generar confianza y llegar a quienes más lo necesitan. Asimismo, Colombia reitera el llamado firme a respetar y proteger al personal humanitario. Atacar o amenazar a quienes brindan asistencia es una violación grave del derecho internacional y socava la posibilidad misma de aliviar el sufrimiento. Proteger a los trabajadores humanitarios es proteger a las comunidades a las que les sirven. Señor presidente, celebramos los esfuerzos de diálogo en curso. Colombia ha reiterado consistentemente que los canales de comunicación deben mantenerse abiertos y operativos, incluso y especialmente en contexto de alta tensión. Saludamos el encuentro celebrado los días 17 y 18 de febrero y alentamos a que estas conversaciones sean sostenidas y sustanciosas, siempre incluyendo a las partes interesadas. Asimismo, es fundamental que toda negociación contemple disposiciones humanitarias, no como un elemento accesorio o condicional, sino como parte integral y esencial del proceso. En ese sentido, subrayamos la importancia de abordar la situación de los prisioneros de guerra, los civiles detenidos y las personas desaparecidas. Las medidas humanitarias pueden y deben generar confianza y aliviar el sufrimiento mientras se buscan soluciones políticas concretas. Señor presidente, Colombia reitera una vez más el llamado a un alto al fuego. Silenciar las armas es una condición indispensable para reducir el sufrimiento inmediato y abrir un espacio real para la negociación y un camino para la paz. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, and I thank the representative of Colombia for her statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Somalia.
Thank you, Mr. President. At the outset, I thank USG DiCarlo for her comprehensive briefing. What began 4 years ago has now entered yet another difficult chapter, with consequences that continue to ripple far beyond its borders. My delegation remains profoundly concerned by the continued deterioration of situation and security and humanitarian situation. The ongoing hostilities serve only to prolong suffering and further diminish prospects for sustainable peace. We are deeply troubled by the continuous escalation of attacks affecting civilian areas and essential infrastructure. The protection of civilians, particularly the most vulnerable, and the preservation of critical infrastructure, including hospitals, schools, and homes, are non-negotiable obligations enshrined in international law. Somalia reiterates that all parties to the conflict must respect and uphold these principles without exception. Mr. President, we remain convinced that there is no military solution to this protracted conflict. Dialogue and diplomacy remain the sole means to bring about an end to this conflict. We note with encouragement the ongoing diplomatic initiatives to achieve a comprehensive ceasefire. We also welcome the recent diplomatic efforts led by the United States, including the third round of trilateral talks, which took place last week in Geneva. These encouragements represent vital steps toward a de-escalation, and we hope they lay the groundwork for a constructive path forward. We call upon all sides to prioritize de-escalation, exercise utmost restraint, and commit to genuine, immediate negotiations. It's incumbent upon all parties to respect international law and to prevent a wider conflagration. A durable resolution must address the underlying root causes of this conflict and be consistent with the principles of the United Nations Charter. We underscore that just and lasting peace will require compromise and confidence-building measures. In closing, Mr. President, my delegation reaffirms its unwavering support for all diplomatic efforts aimed at achieving a resolution that restores security and stability. The people of Ukraine and all of those affected by this conflict deserve a future of peace, prosperity, and dignity. I thank you.
Well, I thank the representative of Somalia for the statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Liberia.
Thank you. Mr. President, Liberia approaches today's discussion not with theoretical detachment, but with lived memory of painful scars. Our own war was internal. Ukraine's is international. The causes may differ, but the suffering is the same. In every conflict, ordinary people form the unwilling front lines, mothers whispering lullabies in basements, children learning the sounds of drones before school bells, and persons with disability facing barriers, not only of mobility, but of survival. Hospitals turn into targets, power plants into ruins, water into scarcity, and hope into fragility. This council was not established to manage wars. It was created to prevent them. Liberia, therefore, unequivocally reaffirms the principles of the United Nations Charter: respect for sovereignty, territorial integrity, political independence, and the prohibition of the use of force. These are not ceremonial words. They are the load-bearing pillars of our international order. When they crack, the entire structure trembles. From Monrovia's own history, we learn a simple but profound truth. War is loud and consuming. Peace is patient and rebuilding, brick by brick. When guns fell silent in Liberia, classrooms reopened, markets revived, roads replaced roadblocks, and former fighters became farmers, teachers, and entrepreneurs. The dividend of peace is not poetic. It is profound.